Are set, and I got it recorded. Thanks, Kevin. Everybody, Kevin. He just left the room, so we're applauding no one now. Hopefully you're all in the right place. I'm Dwayne, we'll get to that in a second, but you're in here for everything louder than everything else, which is navigating stakeholder needs through better discovery. So I'm Dwayne. I work at Pantheon. We've got a booth out there if you want to talk Pantheon stuff. I'm happy to talk Pantheon stuff, but that's out there. I'm not here to talk about that right now. Outside of doing tech stuff, I love improv, I love webcomics and comic books, and I love karaoke, as Mike already spilled the beans on. Drupal karaoke is a hashtag. You can look it up. If you want to get a hold of me, there's my info. All my slides and everything else I do in my life that's tech related or this related is out at mcdwayne.com. Do you guys see on that side? You guys got a clear line of sight, Mike? Okay, good. And I am on Twitter at mcdwayne. Please tweet at me, take pictures. That's my favorite thing in the world. And follow me, I'll follow you back, at least for a while. So, work at Pantheon. Who here has ever heard of Pantheon? Okay, we can skip this then. But we're doing some pretty awesome stuff. We really are. If you haven't checked us out recently, we've gotten a lot of awesome updates and whatnot. So I want to figure out who's in the room. Why did you come to talk about discovery? So let's just say first, like who here runs a business? Who here is in some kind of sales capacity? You own the business. You should go back up. Who here is a developer? Awesome. Who here is a designer? Awesome. Who here is a project manager? Wow, that's a lot. Anybody, this is your first camp of any kind?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to this is your first session at any camp, and you're leaving immediately. That's cool. No pressure at all, actually. So this is a talk. It's called Everything Louder Than Everything Else, which does happen to be Motorhead's 6th live album. They put out a lot of live albums, and Motorhead is one of my favorite bands. If you're not familiar with Motorhead, this is what they look like and sound like. There's no way I can make this loud enough in this room, because this is one of the loudest bands in history. They have like giant Marshall stacks. I think that's about all I can play without getting sued. That's fair use. That's all good use. Motorhead's loud. They are really loud. And where the title of that album came from, Everything Louder Than Everything Else, is that's what they used to yell at their sound guy. Because how do you balance out a band that loud and that aggressive? You make everything louder than everything else. It's obvious. That's what you do, sound guy. And it became a joke with them. So there's a lot of gear that they sell that says everything louder than everything else. I don't think that's that different to have a group of very aggressive people yelling at you or making noise at you and yelling at you that their voice should be the loudest one, and that's the loudest thing in the mix, the most important thing. It's not that much different than if you're in a complex sale or project management situation. If you have a lot of stakeholders on a project and everyone's saying, well, no, just listen to my voice, just listen to me. And normally the loudest person kind of wins, and that results in horrible, horrible things. Because our goal, and I made this especially for designers in the room to love our the pasting here. Our goal in doing any kind of project, any kind of sale, any kind of anything is this. We're trying to match up and line up and match perfectly the expectations and results. And when they match, everybody's happy, but when they don't match, you end up with some pretty interesting results. Like the specification was for a yellow cake with an eye on it. Pretty good. But if people don't get exactly what they want, and it's not the thing on the left, they get fussy. People are people. They have emotional reactions to things. And sometimes it's rational, and sometimes it's very, very much not rational. And I think it's because they didn't feel they get listened to. They feel that they got ignored. And they feel like, oh, well, I need to throw a wrench into this plan, or I need to make sure this doesn't succeed because it didn't go my way. So I live by a handful of principles. One is from Zig, old Zig Ziglar. If you haven't read any books by Zig Ziglar, rest his soul, pick them up. They're way out of date, but he says great things like this. And it's very true. You can get anything you want in life if you just help other people get what they want. And I think, extending that idea, this isn't just a bunch of quotes, they're connected. Greg S. Reed, who's an interesting guy, said this, and I like it because it's a way to make a solid action plan. So if you can just get someone to tell you what they want, and you know how to break that dream down into steps, well, you can make just about anything happen. If my friend Jenny, who runs a co-working space in San Francisco, tells me, you can do anything if you have a solid action plan. But how on earth do we know what they want? This is the key to everything. And also in a group, very large group of people with a lot of stakeholders, how do we know who to listen to? On a transactional sale, this is very simple. Because transactional sales are one person involved, they have immediate buying power. If I was say, hey, I'd like to buy your lanyard, and you say, okay, that's $1, and I give you $1, and you give me the lanyard, we're done. That is the entire transaction. That's all. We don't need to anything else than that. And it's pretty clear, because I said exactly what I wanted at the get-go. If I say, my team here and I would like a website, what on earth does that mean? And who on that team actually do you listen to, and is the authority? Is it the check signer?
Can I interject?
Sure.
Sometimes what they want isn't really what they need.
That's exactly what I'm getting to right here.
Okay.
It's called the discovery process. That is the thing we get to in, that is the process on uncovering what they actually need. And most of the time, if we've done it right, it will actually line up to what they wanted. Because we'll uncover it through the discovery process what in fact they want. So I say discovery process because I'm talking about a project funnel. We call it sometimes called a lead funnel. You can apply the funnel concept to pretty much any aspect of anything. But who here has seen a similar funnel at some point in their life? Awesome. I'll walk you through it real quick. Most people put their hands up. There's a few people that didn't. Basically, you have 4 groups of people in the world. There's the general mass population that has email addresses and names. That's your lead pool. You want to get as many of those people's email addresses and names as you possibly can, because you don't know who is going to be qualified out of that. Qualified is the process you go through. That's the mass emails you get, the general phone calls like, hey, interested in what we do. Because if you have some basic qualifiers, the classic is BANT, budget, authority, need, time frame. I learned Scotsman through the Sandler technique, a solution, the competitors, originality, timing, scale, money, authority, need. It's complex. I have a checklist when I already do this stuff. If you have all those things, you have a very qualified lead because you have a lot of things already going for you. So once we have a qualified lead and we know that, hey, this person can pay for this thing and they actually need it, well, let's go on a discovery process and fine-tune what exactly are we saying they need? What exactly are we going to deliver? And then we take all the findings we had from our discovery process, we write a proposal. Proposal goes through procurement. Procurement becomes delivery. And hopefully you maintain these clients and you put them back at the top of the funnel. This is generic. This isn't just you in a business role selling a project to a client or delivering a project to a client. This is also internal. If someone comes to you and says, hey, we need you to do this. Well, we're pretty sure they're qualified because they asked you to do something, but we still need to go through a discovery process to figure out exactly what they meant. I do this internally all the time when people ask me to do things at Pantheon. It's like, well, what exactly are we looking for? What are the KPIs we're actually trying to get to? And I have a process for that. When there's multiple people involved, or when there's only one person involved, it's pretty simple who to listen to. When there's multiple people, well, we need to do a couple things. First, we need to talk to everyone as a group, get them all in the same place at the same time, and have everyone hear the exact same things, because there's our group dynamics that happen that are only present when everyone's together. You'll notice Who defers to who? Who talks the loudest? Who seems to have a lot of ideas, but no one else is really acknowledging those ideas? If you can all have this meeting in person, have this meeting in person. This is super important. Human beings, our entire way we communicate is built off facial expressions. One of the differences between humans and other animals is our fine motor control of our faces. We can tell almost immediately if someone's lying or something's out of place. The whole idea of the uncanny valley, that you can make cartoons or non-humans look very close to human, and the closer you get to this realistic point, it's like, it's great, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's unsettling. And then you have the real person again. And it's like this uncanny valley that makes you uncomfortable. Anyway, point on all that is, if you're in the same room with people and you see how they're interacting with each other, that tells you a lot about the dynamics of the situation. If everyone in that meeting defers to the one person and agrees with what they say, well, who do you listen to in the group? That person is the default leader here. But it's also very important to talk to everyone one-on-one. And I like these two pictures. It took me a long time to pick these out. Because Lemmy, the guy in the back, the bass player, lead singer, rest his soul, a Motorhead, he's happy, jovial guy here. And here he's kind of serious. He's talking about his hard life. And he lived a hard life. Very different dynamic when you get someone one-on-one. Again, if you can do this live, that's awesome. If not, that's what Zoom, GoToMeeting, all those other things are for. You want as much facial time with the person as you can. See how they respond to things. Because if there's a meeting where everyone's deferring to, say Phil over there on the right, and you get a one-on-one, and he's like, yeah, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, the project needs to do this, and everybody else says the project needs to do that same other thing. Or you're going to treat that differently than everyone says, yeah, Phil's right, let's just do what Phil says. There's a process to get to that kind of honesty, though. No one's just going to jump up and say, no, Phil's wrong. And that's what we're going to spend the whole rest of this time talking about, is the process, the discovery process itself. And I'm not going to tell you a list of questions, though this isn't a bad list of questions. I just Googled project management questions, and this is one of the first things that came up. I want to talk about it in terms of ground rules, the way I like to think about it. Just a general best set of practices I have learned through trial and error. I started in sales in 2005. Never had a sales job before. Grinding it out on phones. Worked in the Java middleware space for a long time, for over 3 years, which is eternity in the valley. I've been at Pantheon for almost 4 years, and that's 2 lifetimes in San Francisco. But in the process, I learned a lot of this stuff the hard way. So hopefully if any of this rings true, what people have told me before about this is they've heard this or they've thought about these things independently, but someone just said them out loud. So I'm saying them out loud. If you walk away with nothing else from this talk, it's this. This is all of discovery in one slide. You listen way more than you talk. There's an old adage in sales, he who talks the most loses. And it's true, you can talk yourself out of a sale. You can talk yourself out of a project. You can talk yourself out of anything if you talk long enough. This is the time where you need to you do need to talk, but you need to lead them talking. So you don't want to talk over them. We have a habit of hearing this much information and be like, I got the solution for that. And I'm not saying we in Drupal, I'm not saying we as developers, I'm not saying we as business owners, I'm saying we as human beings. That's how our brains work. Like, we think we have enough information that we're going to fill in the rest. And that works. That's an unconscious bias. That works a lot of the time. You wouldn't be able to drive cars if that wasn't true. You have to be able, in the second, to say, all right, I know enough information now to guess what's going to happen next. I'm going to jump ahead and do it. Discovery is not the time to do that. This is not an intuitive process. If it was an intuitive process, I wouldn't be giving a talk on it, probably. We'd always be naturally doing it. It's something we need to think about. Am I listening enough here? Am I asking the right questions? Meanwhile, write down everything they say. This goes hand in hand with the first one, but it's it's very specific. Human beings really like talking about things we know about. And as Oscar Wilde says, what better of an expert I am than on myself. That's what we know better than anything, is ourselves. So while there's always the urge, we're going to fill in this information and show like we're smart and we can solve this problem immediately, we also want to show how we'll solve the problem. And there's definitely a time to talk about yourself. It's called the qualification process. Like, this is what I do. This is specifically what I do. This is what I'm great at. Do you need that? If you don't, okay, moving on to the next person that needs it. Oh, you do need this. Okay, let's go through a process of discovery where you tell me exactly what you need now. Now you know what I can do. There's also a time to talk about this afterwards. It's called the proposals phase, where you write down on paper exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And the better you look in that process, that's awesome. But if you do it in discovery and you don't take the time to actually listen to what they really need, they're going to get bored immediately. They're going to be like, well, I thought this meeting was about what I wanted. They might never vocalize that. Most of the way people express that is by never talking to you again. By never answering the phone call, never answering your email, because it's clear you're not going to listen to them. How many people have ever gotten a phone call from a sales rep from anyone, anywhere, and you're like, this person is just reading from a script and has no idea what they're talking about? Yeah, everyone in this room. For those of you at home, that was everyone in the room. Resist talking about yourself and give them room to talk. So how do we do that? It's actually not that hard to get people to open up and just start answering questions. There's only 6 ways you can start a sentence that's open-ended. When I say open-ended question, meaning leads them to spill out more information. Anybody want to guess what those 6 ways are? Anybody?
Who, what, where, when, how, and why?
Exactly. 5 H's, or 5 W's and an H. Good job. Good job. Excellent work. It's true though. There's a big difference between these questions. Are you the person that signs off on this? And this actually happened to me several times in my life. No. And then we just sit there in silence for a second. All right, well, who does sign off on this? And as Carl Sagan says, if we can save a step, let's save a step. So just ask in the first place, who signs off on this? It's a better question because they have to think about it. Not just a no or I don't know. It's like, who signs off on this? Let me think. Because again, they want to talk about themselves. They want to make themselves look good in the process, no matter if they're in a group, no matter if they're by themselves. So giving them the power of like, oh, who does this? You can answer this question. Yeah, they probably can. Next one's a little more specific to design or page layout, but if you ask a person what picture's on the left or the right, and they really, for some reason, wanted that picture dead center at the top, and be like, well, I guess on the left, but they're never going to be happy with that answer. Versus say, where do you imagine seeing these pictures? And they say, I just want them floating around the top. You can explain why that's really hard to do. You're probably not going to do it, but you can at least answer their concern. And like, well, then start asking like, well, why'd you want that? Of all of those 5 or the 6 questions, ways to start sentences, the why I think is the ultimate thing you're digging for. If we don't care about the why, the what and the how are completely irrelevant. If you read a lot of introductions are trying to explain the synopsis of what's going on, but they're also trying to drive home the why they care, why the author is trying to care about this thing. But you can find out the why that relates back to their personal interest in it. It's a completely different conversation. If you ask someone, well, why do we want to do this project? And the answer is, because we want to increase leads 2%. That's a terrible reason. That's a good reason on paper. That's a good reason for an investor group wanting to have a return on investment. That's a terrible personal reason. So you need to keep digging. Again, this is not an intuitive process. But we need to keep digging on the why. Well, why is this? Why is it that way? Why is it this way? Until we get to a personal reason. If it is for a business deal, if it is for a project close, dig until it is, well, I want to keep my job, or because that's the way it has to be done, or this project's going to shut down and I'll lose my house. That's a very dramatic end to that. But if you can get to that level, then you know it's real. Then you know that there are some personal stakes involved. If it's an internal team project, probably ain't going to get that serious. It's like, well, because Jerry runs the department, and that's the way Jerry said it has to be done, we're going to default to Jerry here. That's not a terrible reason if they're not like the key stakeholder. If they're a key stakeholder and they're like, because my entire department rests on this, and I don't want anyone to lose their jobs. That's a really strong motivation. It's not 2% more leads. It is my department doesn't have to get fired. Very, very big gulf in between those two kind of answers. The person that's very passionate and has a very personal, motivating reason to be passionate about it, they're probably the person that's going to champion for you internally. They're probably the person that's going to say, yes, it needs to be done this way. And when something gets stuck, they can unstick it. Because they have personal stake in the game. If it's someone's like, I don't care, do whatever you want, like I got to sign off on this decision, we know we don't need to listen to them. Even if they have problems later, they weren't involved in shaping this thing. And they had no personal stakes. We're talking that point, but it's really important. And again, not intuitive. It's uncomfortable the first time you ask someone why for the fourth time. And it's okay to explain you don't understand. To say, look, I'm just trying to understand what's going on here. I just want to understand your perspective. I'm just trying to figure this out. People are generally like, okay, I can help. They want to help. And this all works if we do a couple things. One is we've got to set up expectations. I love this guy. I Googled guide pointing the way, and a bunch of pictures of this guy come up. Then you can get to this this website, the GettysburgDaily.com. And this guy is a battlefield guide, and there's a bunch of pictures of him pointing the way through town, all these things. And it makes me want to go to Gettysburg, because I know exactly what to expect, and I hope John's around and shows me where stuff is, because I feel pretty comfortable with this guy right now. That's how everyone in a project should feel. Like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen next. I know exactly where we're going. Oh, I've seen this hardware store before. Those green tractors, I was expecting to see those. Oh man, it's going to feel amazing when I get to Gettysburg and see this stuff. And that's how every project's like, oh, here's the milestones. Here's what we're going to deliver by X date. Oh, and we're ahead of schedule. Oh my goodness. And everybody's like, oh, I expected this. Or even if you're a little late, knowing that, hey, we might run into problems on these parts. This might take longer than expected, but no, we're going to get there. And this is how you can tell we're going to get there. Lay it out and explain what the whole project is. But specifically to discovery, let them know the discovery process and how it's going to take place for you. These are my general ground rules, and I can tell you my process, but you will figure out a process that works for you, that you'll be very comfortable with, and just lay that out. Because we want to be transparent. Be as transparent as humanly possible. And this is why. We do business, we do projects with people we trust. That's kind of it. That's the whole thing. If someone you don't know calls up and says, I want you to do this thing for me, that's weird. That's just weird. But you get a call from an old friend you went to college with, like, hey, we haven't talked in a couple of years, but I understand, like, your life's like this. Could you help me on this project? Like, yeah, we can do that. We're old buddies. We can make that happen. You want to get to that point of trusted advisor. Of you're so invested in it, you've listened to what they need so much, you've fed back to them, and it's so clear that you're listening and you're involved with this as well, that they say, I trust this person. Let's move forward with this. This works both ways, too. And you can tell them this. It's like, look, I want to be transparent with you. I don't want to waste your time. And I'm expecting you're going to be transparent with me. And you don't want to waste my time. That's more kind of an aggressive sales move, but it works. Nobody wants to waste anyone's time. Everyone wants to be trusted. Like, I would love to trust you in this. So let's get to the root of it. Let's get to it. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. I'm probably going to ask why way too many times, but I really just need to understand your viewpoint. If you lead the conversation with that kind of a idea, like, hey, we're going to dig in here. It's going to get a little uncomfortable probably a couple times, and I'm going to ask why probably too many times, and then you do that, is a much different reaction than you just dive in and start asking why repeatedly. Because that gets annoying quick. But if you set it up at the beginning, like, look, I just need to know this. I just got to figure this out. And be passionate about it. And be trustworthy about it. I think one of the easier ways to approach these two things, to guide it, is I can lay out freedoms. Don't give them rights, don't give them responsibilities. Say, oh, you're free for these. We've got some basic freedoms here. Here's ones that I fall back on a lot. It's like, you can always answer any question I don't know. If that person answers I don't know a lot, that's probably not a stakeholder you need to listen to a lot, because they don't know what's going on. If they say I don't know is just to get out of answering an uncomfortable question, again, this is why face-to-face is super important. Because if someone's uncomfortable, they look uncomfortable. We're really, really good at picking out who's uncomfortable in the crowd. We're just evolutionarily, that's the way we developed. Freedom to talk about the personal stakes. Again, it's not intuitive. It's not something people naturally do to say, oh, I need to send my kid to college. That's why I want to have this website be a different color. That's not an intuitive process at all. Just let them know, like, no, you're free here. This is a safe space. That's the next thing, reproach. Reproach from a couple things. One, let them know that you have no personal interest in this at all. Like, from a personal vendetta perspective. So if you say something that is impossible or weird, that stays between you and me, and I don't care. Like, that's okay. Not that you don't care, but we're never going to bring it back on you. We're never going to call the meeting. Remember that time you said that weird idea that Drupal can't even do? This guy. You're never going to do that. And freedom from reproach from the teammates. Like, hey, I need you to be honest with me here. I'm just trying to figure out, like, who's really in charge of the project. You want them to have freedom to say, well, technically John is in charge, but Joan really runs everything around here. I'd listen to Joan if I were you. And you're never going to come back and say, well, obviously Joan's the one in charge here, and so-and-so told me this. Let them know that, look, this is safe. We're doing safe here. You're not going to talk about anything that deep anyway. And last, freedom to dream. It's the biggest hurdle you hit in discovery. Is people like to think in very point project terms and not the big picture. And if you don't have the big picture, you're just going to be chasing your tail around project goals and maybe never solve the root problems. But if you can get to, like, hey, this is what we're actually trying to do, and you can actually solve that, there's a ton of value in that. And you're going to make a lot more people happy if you can solve the underlying thing they're actually shooting for. Because maybe a consultant told them 2 years ago that this was the thing they needed to do, and they're just now getting around to it. But the underlying problem is something you've solved 100 times before in your life. And you just say, well, why don't we do it this way, and everybody's going to be happy. And sometimes that works. And sometimes people are like, no, it has to be done this way. But the freedom to dream, the way I used to phrase that in my sales calls was, if I gave you a magic wand, you just wave it, and a result came out the other end, what would that be? What was the results on the other side? I'm not talking just the day of delivery. I mean like 6 months, a year out. What KPIs are you actually looking for? Like, you wave a magic wand and these KPIs go up. What are those KPIs? Because then we go back to the Greg Reed quote. Once we know what they're trying to get to, we can work backwards. It's like, oh, I can write that down, break that into steps. This is the plan. Give it to them a proposal, get their money. Pretty straightforward at that point. But that's hard. Getting people to dream is hard. Having them back up and say, well, no, you're telling me how you would solve this particular problem, but what's the bigger picture? What are you actually trying to solve here? Is the freedom to dream. Discovery is a long process. It could be one call. In transactional sales, it's almost non-existent. You go to an ice cream shop, the entire discovery process is what flavor ice cream would you like? That's it. That's the entire process. You get your ice cream, you pay the money, you leave. In complex sales situations, this could take months. Biggest deal I ever closed took 6 months to close. And it was almost all discovery. Because once we got the proposals in hand, it was just the procurement back and forth for a couple weeks with lawyers. But most of that was just getting people on the same page of what we were even doing. That was back in the JavaScript days, or my Java middleware days. But by the end, you know you're at the end when you have all of your questions answered and you can confidently write that proposal and know that there are not going to be any surprises in there. That when I see those looks, there's no surprises in there that you're going to take it to them and they're going to say, we didn't say this. We don't want this. This isn't what we were looking for. Because you can say, well, here's the research. Like, I asked everyone here and everyone said that this is the goal. Like, it would be very shocking if they said, no, last minute. That's not what we said at all. That's a giant red flag and you should probably walk away at that point if you spent the time to actually do a proper discovery process. If you get giant surprises at the end. But you should be confident that when I hand this over, this is what I wrote down, this is what everyone said, this is what everyone signed off on before they ever saw this proposal. That's what I mean by no surprises. Of course there's going to be surprises. This is not foolproof, 100% anything ever. Your results may vary. I fly a lot. An awful lot. This is my 33rd event in 2017. I got one more to go. One of my favorite sounds in the world, and it sounds weird, is flight attendants disarm doors and prepare for all call. Because that means we landed safely and they're ready to unlock the doors and let us off the plane. And there's no problems. We're done. We got there because the pilot and the flight attendants have a laundry list of things to check off. They're giant checklists. And that's the last one before they open the door. To check that, the pilot's got other things on their checklist. I've looked into this in the FAA website. But that's the signal that we're at that point in the checklist. They armed the doors, they taxied, they took off, they changed altitude, they did all the things. A lot of technical things. It gave me a lot of comfort. And I think this is no different than any other complex project you're in. That if you go in and say, oh, I need to get all these questions answered, that's a little overwhelming. But if you go in and say, I have this process I go through. It's called discovery. Here's how it works. Here's how I use it every time. I've refined this over time. You're not a guinea pig with this. And we're going to get to a point where I'm going to give you a signal that, hey, we're done with discovery. And it's going to be in the form of a proposal. We're going to have a meeting about it. But you'll know that we're at the end of this process when I am ready to hand you this over. I would take a lot of comfort in that sale. I have taken comfort in that sale when I bought things, and they've taken me through that. This is how this works. This is exactly what we're going to do. Oh, and here we are at the end. Here's your results. Or here's your proposal. Go ahead and buy it. Again, questions themselves don't matter. These questions, I'm saying, don't specifically matter. This is not a bad list. It's good questions. You want to go look it up. It's not important that you have a giant sheet of questions when you walk in. It's important that you have questions you need answered for this particular project. It just takes homework, some thought, and it will evolve. But getting through a process reliably that you can fine-tune over time will get you from that down to this. I realized, actually, I meant to do that last time, or switch these around, because I realized we're leaning down into the right, which is optically a weird thing. But if people feel listened to, if people feel that they're getting value, they're probably going to be happy with things. So that's my talk. And we're at Pantheon. All these slides and everything else is over at mcdwayne.com. And open it for questions. All right, go back.
So you ever do all the discovery, and then you're say, yeah, I got all this stuff, and you go back and you start writing the proposal, and then you realize, oh crap, I forgot to talk about this.
Uh-huh.
Or I forgot to ask this.
So that's the very nice thing here is if you end it with well, we'll know we're done with discovery when I finally give you the proposal. That door is completely open for you to go back and ask questions until you've given them the proposal. And there's a positive response to that. It's like, hey, I was writing this up, and I realized that we really hadn't discussed this. I know we've already had like 5 conversations, but we need to have one more because we want to nail this. Want to make sure you're super happy. And most of the time, people are really reasonable about that because it feels again that they've been listened to. That we have a part in this, they have a part to play, and we're not at the end yet because we haven't given me the proposal yet. Okay, let's keep going. Some people will react badly to that, but some people will react badly to anything. What, we need another phone call? Oh my goodness. I think though, again, having the same process you go through every time, you'll fine tune it, and that will happen less and less the more you do the exact same process.
Might not be the right guy to ask, but how often do you manage to get paid to do the hours and work that?
Great question.
Yes.
And you're right. I am not the most qualified expert in that particular area. I'm just the guy that agreed to stand up here and talk about it. Somebody said that at a camp once and I really liked it. So the question was paid discovery. How do you get people to pay for it? I never have, but I've always had the luxury of selling a product. And I work for a product company. And that is baked into the sales process. That's how I did all my discovery. It's like, we're going to spend as much time as we need to get to yes, or we're going to get to no immediately. And that was kind of like what drove the whole thing. So let's get through discovery as quick as we can. That's how you get, why I have an efficient process, because I had to. Because we need to move through it as fast as humanly possible. If it's going to be a process where it's small transactional, just don't bill for it. Just, that's a transactional sale. You need this, let's sell that. If it's going to be more complex, if it's somebody you've worked with before and you're like, I know this is going to take X amount of hours, you can just build that into the whole project and they'll be cool with that. If it's somebody you've never worked with, nothing wrong with charging for discovery. Say, we've never worked together before, let's go ahead and do a paid discovery session. I've heard some people report that hourly is the preferred way to go with that, because then if discovery takes 2 weeks and the client's cool with that because they needed to get that deep and that complex of a project, then that's going to be fine. Or if after that first hour they realize, this company has no idea what they're doing, they don't have a business plan, they want a website to miraculously save their awful, awful company, then you can walk away after an hour, send them a bill, and say, look, I'm not the right person for you, but here's the contract to sign. So I've heard, giving this talk and similar talks for the last couple of years, a variety of answers. That's a pretty common one. Charge if it's unknown, go for an hour, or if somebody worked with before, just lump it in.
So when you talk about talking to people individually and then bringing them together as a group, I really like that. My job is doing a bunch of different projects for different stakeholders within the company, so it's not different customers. I wouldn't have them talk to each other necessarily,
sure.
But getting them in a group and then having them talk to each other is important, because somebody may think their thing is the most important, and it is to them, but it may not rise to the top of all the lists. And for them to hear that from why somebody else thinks their needs are great really helps them to feel like, okay, now I understand why I'm not going to get my stuff done for a while, because there's a fixed number of resources. These things will help out the whole company, and then we'll get to mine.
So I didn't talk a lot about the specifics of using discovery in a group situation.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely key.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. Once everyone's in the room, it's not a presentation. It's not you. It's the same thing as one-on-one. It's the same rules. It's you talk 25% of the time at max. You're getting them to talk. In a group situation, a whiteboard is your best friend, because you can write down exactly what they said as they said it, and later you can refer back to it because they wrote it. If your handwriting's bad, get someone in the room to do it for you. I do that sometimes. Because you're right, if they don't talk to each other about it, no one's ever going to be happy.
Yeah.
But if they're all in the same room and everyone's had a chance to say something, and everyone's agreed or shaking their head, at least you have that initial feedback of this is how this is going to go. And if they're completely not on the same page at all, that's a giant red flag. And if you're internal to a company, you've got to figure out how to fix that. But that's internal team dynamics versus a client where you can just walk away and say, well, good luck. But that group that is one of the major reasons for that group meeting. I think you should have one at the beginning and one at the end, before proposal. See what changed in that group dynamic over the course of them talking to each other without you around.
For us, we do it in two different ways. Since we have just multiple projects all the time, like we have a regular cadence of every month.
Oh, cool.
Getting them together, so that as the priorities adjust, people can see and make their cases again. We actually have our operations team do it daily, because if you need this thing to happen, instead of, all the people who need their things to happen can get a certain number of things on the Kanban board for that team, and it takes 15 minutes, but then you can horse trade or do what you need to do to get your stuff done.
Excellent point, man. That's good.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good place to work, actually. Where are you working?
Aqua.
Aqua.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good place to work.
Yeah.
Can you compare the value of having cold and prepared discovery discussions? So
Cold versus prepared discovery.
yeah,
What do you
like
mean?
I have a small team. I know we're going to be going into a project, and I know that our stakeholders will probably not want to pay a vendor for a lot of discovery time.
Sure.
So what's the value of prepping the team? Like going in and saying, here's a list of questions to prepare your thoughts, or is there value to getting gut reactions from them not being
I
prepared?
personally think there's a lot more value to gut reactions. If you give people a list of questions beforehand, they will answer it. They'll answer it to protect themselves as much as they can. And sometimes protecting themselves doesn't mean the truth. In the best case scenario, it does, and everyone's best interests align perfectly. But that's why, again, you want to be face-to-face as much as possible to see those gut reactions. Because everyone's kind of like, that's a terrible idea when someone says something. That's much different than thinking about that, like, no, we're probably going to have to defer to Jerry on all this anyway. Let's just go with that. And they'll have done those mental gymnastics before you got there. And then when it comes time to pull the trigger, they're not going to be happy. And they're going to start finding the way people express their displeasure. I wish it was as simple as babies crying, because that is super simple to read. Even though you're not 100% sure why they're crying, you know they're unhappy. Adults, especially in complex business situations, behave very weirdly. Things that don't matter at all suddenly become the most important thing in the world, and that's why we can't do it. Oh man, and torpedo the whole thing, because they're just trying to find a way to torpedo the thing. Because it wasn't quite what they wanted, and they're a little unhappy. So if you don't have any time at all to do discovery, maybe a list of questions. But then you really have to ask yourself, like, what are we doing here if this client won't do a discovery process with us on our terms? If your terms are, we'll do a short discovery, and that works for you for what you're selling or what you're doing, that, again, I can't tell you how your process should look. I tell you these are just general best practices. So it might work for you, it might not. Mileage may vary. It's an unfortunate answer, I give a lot. All right, so we're right about 45 minutes, so I think I have time for one more, and then we'll get out of here. Or we just go now and stop anybody.
Well, I hope this isn't too strange of a question, but do you have any advice on how to get to know quickly?
How to get to know quickly.
Yeah.
Hopefully in the qualification process, you've gotten to know very quickly and being okay with no. There's a difference between getting to know quickly and being okay with getting to know quickly.
Yeah.
And it's harder to be okay with it. Getting to know quickly is not hard. It's like, can you pay for this? Are you willing to pay this much money for this? And if you have a bottom threshold, like we're sticking firm on this. This is the very bottom, and we're going to do discovery, and it's probably going to go up. And they're like, oh, I can't do that. Stop talking.
I mean, is that a good place to start,
Yeah.
generally?
Well, that goes back. I'll pull up the thing again. But yeah, you don't want to do discovery on anybody but fully qualified leads.
Yeah.
So you're going to get to know really quick and qualified leads. Oh, they would love to do this, but they have no authority. Great, go find the person with authority and come back and we'll do it and have a conversation. And that will kill a lot of things.
Or they're on the money. Whatever.
Yeah. Oh, we have this brilliant idea. We're going to make $1 million. We'll give you part of it. I would take the money up front. Me personally. And then discovery, yeah, there are ways they will disqualify themselves, but it'll be pretty quick, I think. At least it's been for me in group dynamics when it's, oh, we have this great idea, but there's no business model under it whatsoever. There's no way they could possibly pay for this thing. They might be able to sign on a dotted line, but they're a lawyer. They can figure out how to get around that later. That's happened to me a couple times, actually. People just sign things and they didn't end up paying. Those things happen. Again, none of this is 100% foolproof, but if you have a reliable system you go through every time, you can start fine-tuning and get things, learn how to get to know faster for your particular thing that you're trying to do. All right, well, with that, I will push the big red button and end this session here, the first session here at NEDCamp 27. Everybody!